Imagine waking up to find your savings gone, the bank doors locked, your job vanished overnight, and your children staring at you with hunger you cannot satisfy. This was not a nightmare. This was America in the 1930s. The Great Depression was not simply an economic collapse. It was a crucible that tested endurance, tore at dignity, and forced a nation to ask, could democracy survive despair? And here lies the paradox we'll unravel. The New Deal promised rescue, but in the end, it may not have been reforms that ended the crisis at all, but the firestorm of global war. The Roaring Twenties glittered with promise. Stock prices tripled, skyscrapers rose, radios and cars filled homes. Families invested in Wall Street with a gambler's faith. But much of it was built on credit. 2 out of every 3 stocks were bought on margin. Borrowed money, gambling that values would always rise. Then came October 29, 1929. Black Tuesday. More than 16 million shares traded hands, wiping out $30 billion in value, nearly the federal budget for the entire year. The panic spread like fire. Banks, overextended and unregulated, began to fail. Confidence collapsed. And in that collapse, the glittering illusions of the 1920s gave way to the harsh truth beneath. By 1933, industrial production had fallen by half. 1 in 4 Americans, 12 million people, were unemployed. Life became improvisation. Men sold apples for a nickel on street corners. Families stuffed rags into broken windows, used newspaper as insulation, and burned furniture for heat. In Pennsylvania, children scavenged garbage heaps for food. Farmers faced an even crueler twist. With crop prices so low, milk was poured into ditches, corn burned for fuel, while hungry children looked on. This was more than economic failure. It was humiliation. The American dream, home, work, self-reliance, seemed to vanish overnight. Desperation soon turned to protest. In the summer of 1932, nearly 20,000 World War I veterans marched on Washington. They built camps along the Anacostia River. Families huddled in tents, demanding early payment of bonuses promised years earlier. They weren't asking for charity, they were asking for what was owed. But the government's answer was force. General Douglas MacArthur, with young officers Eisenhower and Patton at his side, sent cavalry and tanks to clear the camps. Tear gas filled the air. 2 men were killed, hundreds injured. It was an image seared into the nation's conscience, the Republic turning its army against its own soldiers. If veterans could be crushed, who was safe? In March 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt took office as banks failed by the thousands. His first act was a bold gamble, a bank holiday. For 4 tense days, every bank in America closed. When they reopened under new protections, confidence returned. Then came the alphabet soup of programs. The Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, put millions of young men to work planting forests, building trails, and sending wages home. The Works Progress Administration, WPA, employed millions more, building 650,000 miles of roads, thousands of schools, and funding murals. The Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, brought electricity to some of the poorest regions of America. And in 1935, the Social Security Act created pensions for the elderly and insurance for the unemployed, the first permanent safety net in American history. For the first time, government was not just an observer of the economy, but a lifeline. Yet critics bristled. Business leaders called Roosevelt a traitor to his class. The Supreme Court struck down entire programs. To conservatives, the New Deal smelled of socialism. To radicals, it did not go far enough. Roosevelt pressed on, reshaping the relationship between citizens and their state. As if economic ruin weren't enough, nature itself joined the assault. Across the Great Plains, overplowing and drought created a man-made catastrophe. With deep-rooted prairie grasses gone, the soil lifted into choking black blizzards. On Black Sunday, April 14, 1935, a storm so vast it turned noon into midnight swept across the plains. People stumbled in darkness, choking on the dust. Over the decade, 2.5 million people fled the region. Nearly 400,000 Oklahomans alone piled their lives onto trucks and headed west. John Steinbeck captured their struggle in The Grapes of Wrath. Dorothea Lange's migrant mother captured it in a single haunting image. A woman's lined face, children leaning on her shoulders, eyes staring into a future she could not promise them. Despite years of reform, by 1939 unemployment still hovered around 17%. The New Deal had offered relief, but not full recovery. The final cure came not through legislation, but through war. As Europe plunged into conflict, American factories roared back to life. By 1943, the US was producing 40% of the world's weapons. Unemployment fell below 2%. Here lies the cruel paradox. The Depression ended not by lifting lives, but by preparing for their destruction. And yet, without Roosevelt's reforms, could American democracy have survived long enough to fight? Europe had turned to fascism in despair. America, though scarred, clung to democracy. That too was Roosevelt's legacy. The Great Depression left scars that never fully healed, but it also left institutions that still shape our lives. It forced Americans to accept a new idea. Government was not only referee of the economy, but guardian of its people. And it left haunting questions. Was the Depression a failure of capitalism itself, or of capitalism left unchecked? Did Roosevelt save democracy, or simply buy time until war transformed it? Perhaps its greatest irony is this: from collapse came reinvention, from despair, resilience, from a decade of darkness, the seeds of a stronger America. So was the Great Depression a collapse or a crucible? Perhaps the answer lies in its paradox. America was broken, yet from its breaking came endurance, reform, and a vision of survival that still echoes today. The Great Depression warns us of fragility, but also reminds us of resilience. And that is why, nearly a century later, its lessons still burn bright